Welcome to our symposium, which we have called How Not to Build a Bunker, Reinvigorating Democracy, Rejecting AI Apocalypticism, and Resisting the Rush to Build AGI. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Alice Crary. I'm a member of the philosophy faculty. I use she, her pronouns, and together with our philosophical colleague, Emil Torres, I'm a co-convener of this event. We're honored to have with us the New School's provost, Professor Renée T. White, to open our proceedings. Provost White is professor of sociology with an AB from Brown and an MA and PhD from Yale. She has disciplinary expertise in a wide range of areas, including Black feminism, Black film studies, race-based disparities in healthcare and higher education, and Blackness in popular culture. I cannot imagine a better person to open our proceedings, and I ask you to join me in welcoming her.
Thank you so much. That's lovely. Thanks so much, Alice. So I just want to welcome you all. And obviously, I'm so delighted and pleased to be here this evening for what I know really promises to be an inspiring and also enlightening symposium with our distinguished guests. So I want to just offer a few words before we get underway this evening. So I greet you tonight in a moment that is many things. It is exciting, it is dangerous, and often quite perplexing. This is an era of almost sometimes comical villainy at home. Think about, there are a wide range of ways you could take that, right? So think about the poor weather forecasters in Florida being targeted with death threats, right? And this idea of the mythology of science just for doing their jobs. It's also a time of, sadly, despair-provoking conflict in other nations and of a global climate crisis hanging over everything, a crisis that is also a racial and gender justice crisis. And yet, there are individuals and organizations who lead by their example, shedding light on what we know are social structures and practices that reliably cause grievous injustices. One of the great pleasures in my role at the New School, and it really is true, is to be able to support projects and events like these that address the urgent issues of our time. It is also equally my pleasure to see colleagues who are always ready to tackle the complex questions, to consider social problems with a keen eye, with a view to defending the ideals of democracy and social justice, which is what I take especially seriously. So this convening is, in my view, one such event where that is happening. So today it is clear that we need to be talking about the ethics of technology, about how new technologies, such as, for instance, AI tools, are developed, made available, and regulated or not. And if we are to find ways to sustain truly democratic modes of public discourse. Although it is clear that these new technologies that are liberating promise, that their development is often driven by ideologies that not only obscure, but exacerbate grievous injustices, reinforcing existing race, indigeneity, gender, and ability-based modes of oppression. You know, I've been doing some work on code switching, like a sideline. And, you know, one of the things that I talk about in trying to sort of address the ways that technologies are centered around racial, gender, class, and justice is just thinking about everything from how beta testing of technology results in the exclusion of groups of people whose engagement with that technology is not considered in their development. So even for someone like me who's a sociologist, I see the ways in which the work that you're here to really address is relevant in our day-to-day existence. So it is imperative, it is absolutely imperative, that we critically interrogate these topics, asking challenging questions, an approach that is foundational to what we do here at the New School. I'm really proud and delighted that we're hosting such a distinguished group of scholars at this university to place the ongoing rush to build artificial general intelligence and the various utopian and apocalyptic scenarios that are floated in connection with this scramble under a rigorous critical microscope. I warmly welcome our speakers and the larger community that's here this evening. I wish you success during your 2 days of intensive discussion, problem solving, and collaborative future thinking. And I thank you so much for joining us. And now I will turn it back to Alice, who will say a few more words.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you so much, Provost White. So, good evening again. I start now with the New School's Land Acknowledgement. Its text reflects urgently needed recognition of histories of violence that condition and continue to inform our present. It is particularly appropriate to think about the attitudes the text enjoins during this week of Indigenous Peoples Day. The text also orients us towards modes of thought and action of the sorts this symposium speakers and participants will be urging. Here's the text. The New School is located on Lenape, Hoking, the unceded homeland of the Lenape people. We acknowledge the Lenape community, their elders past and present, and future generations throughout the Lenape diaspora. The university acknowledges the forced removal, exclusions, and erasures of many Indigenous people throughout this territory, and we recognize the sovereignty of the Delaware Nation, the Delaware Tribe of Indians, and the Stockbridge-Munsee community. Further, we acknowledge that the New School sits on this unceded land within a city originally constructed in large part by enslaved people, and that our institution benefits from the legacy of their labor. So the main title of this event, How Not to Build a Bunker, is an attempt to gather themes our speakers will be addressing in myriad ways. These include themes of techno-triumphalist ideologies that make it seem as though all ecological and social difficulties are aptly conceived as technical problems that allow for market-based fixes. Some of the symposium speakers will talk about how such ideologies are driving the rush to build AGI, artificial general intelligence, a rush that presents itself both as necessary for the survival of humanity and as risking an extinction-threatening apocalypse to which the supposedly rational response is to build a bunker or perhaps colonize exoplanets or digitize our consciousnesses. Among the goals of the symposium are unearthing the histories of these damaging ideologies and developing frameworks for new conversations and collaborations with an eye to dismantling them, with an eye that is to resistance. This annual symposium is named for two of the NSSR philosophy department's most revered and iconic late members, Hannah Arendt and Rainer Schürmann. Our project today and tomorrow is strikingly in the spirit of Arendt's thought in particular. In 1950, in the preface to The Origins of Totalitarianism, Arendt described challenges of getting in view the new horrific constellation of the 20th century she called totalitarianism. She wrote, "The conviction that everything that happens on Earth must be comprehensible can lead to interpreting history by commonplaces. Comprehension does not mean denying the outrageous, deducing the unprecedented from precedents, or explaining phenomena by such analogies and generalities that the impact of reality and the shock of experience are no longer felt. Comprehension, in short, means the unpremeditated, attentive, facing up to, and resisting of reality, whatever it might be." Today, once again, we face new political configurations and confront new challenges of comprehension. As we strive to understand, we should be guided by Arendt's unwavering insistence on political responsibility, her insistence that horrors of the 20th century did not have to happen and could have been prevented. In this symposium spirit, Emile and I want to thank the very many people and groups who helped make it happen. In addition to Provost White, the NSSR Philosophy Department and the NSSR Dean's Office, who are our generous co-sponsors, Despina Dantes, the Philosophy Department's main administrator, who helped with every detail, Sherry Cohen, the NSSR's Director of Communications and Events, who got the word out, Ross Edwards, who made our poster and assisted with logistics, Kevin Howery and Nina Nima Apkanar, who helped with room and other arrangements, Danyang Guo and PJ Hunter, who are handling videography, and staff at the New School's offices of equipment, IT events, security, and buildings and management, all of whose efforts made this evening possible. Last, but by no means least, we thank our speakers and commentators who have many demands on their time and who have been so generous in agreeing to spend these days with us. Just after this first talk and Q&A, we'll be serving food, light vegan fare, food. We encourage you to linger with us, eat a bit, and continue the conversation. We pick up tomorrow again at 10 a.m. and we'll be putting out coffee, tea, and a bagel spread. So look at our schedule and please join us tomorrow. And I'm going to give the floor to Emile, who's going to introduce our first distinguished speaker. Thank you so much.
So our first, sorry, Alice. Our first distinguished speaker. Oh, he's here. Okay. Good. You were able to get your student in. Okay, so as mentioned, I'm Emile Torres. I'm a philosopher and one might say historian, perhaps. So it's my honor and delight to introduce our speaker for tonight, Dr. Douglas Rushkoff. I suspect that many of you are already familiar with at least some of Rushkoff's work. He's a highly influential media theorist, author, graphic novelist, and documentarian. He's written columns for The Guardian, Discover Magazine, and The New York Times, among others, and published more than 20 books, including the bestsellers Present Shock and Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus, in addition to novels and graphic novels such as Ecstasy Club and Alistair and Adolf. I assume I'm pronouncing that right. Yeah. So his book, Coercion, received the Marshall McLuhan Award for Outstanding Book in the field of media ecology. And in 2004, the Media Ecology Association awarded him the first Neil Postman Award for career achievement in public intellectual activity. So that's amazing. He's a media commentator for CNN and has made several PBS frontline documentaries as well, such as Merchants of Cool. Rushkoff is currently a research fellow at the Institute for the Future based in California, and he founded the Laboratory for Digital Humanism at the City University of New York in Queens. His alma maters include Princeton University, where he earned a BA, the California Institute of the Arts, the American Film Institute, and Utrecht University in the Netherlands, where he earned his PhD in 2012. Among the many colorful words that he's coined are viral media, a term that I'm sure every one of us has used before, social currency, and screenagers, which refers to people who were raised native to the interactive environment, that is, people for whom typing or moving things on the screen was normal. In an interview with UNESCO from earlier this year, Rushkoff said that, quote, "For me, the height of the screenager was when I went into an appliance store in the mid-2000s with all those widescreen TVs and saw a 3 to 4-year-old walk up to the screen and try to swipe it." That's the notion of the screenager. So in 2022, Rushkoff published a fascinating and very insightful book, which I know some of you have read before, titled The Survival of the Richest, which details his interactions with 5 mysterious billionaires who summoned him to a desert resort for a private talk about how to survive the impending collapse of society. A central idea in the book is what he calls the mindset, which refers to a particular ideology or worldview that has become fairly widespread among tech billionaires today. Rushkoff's talk tonight, I believe, will be focused at least in part on this idea of the mindset, and indeed the title is "We Are as Gods, Deconstructing the Tech Bro Mindset." So this short introduction, I think, hardly does justice to Rushkoff's exceptional scholarship, academic career, and work as a public intellectual, but anything short of a 40-minute long introduction, or perhaps a lot longer than that, would be an injustice. So I'm going to end it with that. I hope you have a good sense of who our amazing speaker is for tonight, and I will pass the stage over to Douglas Rushkoff. So please give him a warm applause.
Gosh, I'm just honored to be considered one of you tonight. You know, this is, on the one hand, it's like my home team. On the other hand, it's like, you know, real professors of real philosophy, and I'm just kind of this, I don't know. I sometimes feel like I'm more of I emerged from pop culture and figured out McLuhan later. So tonight, I guess just because this is kind of the person I am, I feel like I want to be honest and practical, right? So tomorrow, I'm very interested in learning more about the philosophies behind the bunker mentality and TESCREAL and all that. But I think it goes without saying that our common interest is in somehow deprogramming, if not the tech bros themselves, helping to deprogram our society of the values that have either trickled down from them or been absorbed by those of us who live, work, and play in the environments that are created with TESCREAL as the unacknowledged operating system and environment. So I'll make no bones about it that my work is activist, right? So I'm looking at it that way. How do we heal, reform society and retrieve human values amidst this overarching sociopathy? So yeah, it's interesting, the bunker story. You know, I write this book, Survival of the Richest, which is really a pretty big, sweeping book on, 2,000 years of colonialism and dominator male mentality and how it ended up informing technological development and capitalism and all. And that one little story at the beginning, my encounter with the 5 billionaires, is the thing. And if you go back and read it, it's not that I was summoned by 5 billionaires to go to their secret lair. In actuality, what was really happening was a big hedge fund was having a retreat for 100 or so of its very best, wealthiest clients. And when they do these retreats, they give them a menu at the beginning of the different things they can do, like cook an omelet with Emerald, right? Improve your golf swing with, Tiger Woods. And each of these people gets paid like $30, $40, $50,000 to show up, spend an hour with these gentlemen, and go home. And they have a few sort of highbrow ones. So one of them was, spend an hour or have lunch with futurist Douglas Rushkoff. So of the 100 people that were there, about 5 of them chose to come to me instead of getting their tantric massage with, yoni lady. And one of them, in advance, because he's going to get to talk to a futurist, and he's never read a single word I've written, just like most reviewers haven't, but that's another story. Hasn't read a single word I've written. Think a futurist is coming. I'm going to bring the plans to my bunker and let him, this futurist guy, futurize it. Look and see. That's what futurists do, right? They imagine future scenarios. So he's going to see, is it going to work? Is it going to protect me from zombies, radiation, all that? So that was really, that was the way it happened, right? 5 guys sitting there asking me stupid questions about, Bitcoin, Ethereum, VR, AR, and then finally Alaska, New Zealand. Then the guy pulls out his blueprint, and I'm like, what the fuck, man, right? And that was when I went into not what I do here, but I slipped into my role as kind of intellectual dominatrix, right? Which is what I get paid to do when rich people hire me, right? Thank you, sir. May I please have another, right? You guys are evil. You're destroying the planet. Oh, thank you, right? So they can go back and, right, hire a Marxist, right? It's the same thing, right? You just, They love it. That's the sick part, is they actually love it. But we'll get into that later. They fetishize it. It's interesting. So anyway, so I teased them as how that conversation happened. And it doesn't come off like that so much in the book because I didn't want to look cruel. But I was like, dudes, what are you going to do when we're all storming at the gates, right? Have you thought about that? And they're like, oh, we've got Navy SEALs. Dudes, how are you going to pay your Navy SEALs after your money's worthless? Right, so these are like 14-year-olds using Walking Dead level scenario planning, right? And they're billionaires. So that was the cognitive dissonance for me. I still somehow assume the people who have those giant houses in Redwood Hills, that they must know something that I don't. They really don't. They really don't. They do something that we won't, but they don't know something that we don't. They're actually not. They're not brilliant. They're not looking into the future. So my intervention with them was to tweak them, was to play with them. And I left them by saying the way to prevent your security guys from killing you in the bunker is to be nice to them now. I said, find your head of security and pay for his daughter's bat mitzvah. Is that joke I did, which was a nice sort. I'm Jewish, so I can get away with it. But it was like, dude, what are you thinking? It'll be harder for him to shoot you between the eyes. Now, the weird thing is, so then I used that moment as emblematic of this mindset, this way of thinking about the world, right? How do I escape? And to reveal that these men had no plan, right? That these men were actually driven to escape from us, both because of what they're doing to us, because of the nature of exponential capitalism, because of the way they understand technology, because of their sort of pedal to the metal sort of Western colonization thing. When you run out of planet, what do? Right? This understanding of humanity as being in the larval stage, the maggot stage of evolution, living on this big piece of shit, and them as the winged ones who will get off, right, and actually go. So it doesn't matter if the maggots die, right? The ones that get the wings get to live. And how do I communicate that? But after this book comes out, most of the inquiries I got, both from the press and from people, was, what sort of tips did you learn from the billionaire? How do I build my bunker? It was either people asking me for help with their bunkers or bunker-type companies asking me for access to the billionaires. It's all bunkers all the time, right? And that wasn't the intent. The intent of the book was, it was meant as a black comedy, that how can we laugh and look at how those values of domination and escape have replaced those of cooperation and mutual aid. How did that happen, right? And why would the wealthiest, most powerful people on the planet feel utterly powerless to influence the future? That the best they could do is predict the future and then hang on for dear life, right? They're going to prepare for the future rather than create the future. And if anyone's creating the future, you would think it would be the people with power and money. So TESCREAL, which is, brilliant, right? TESCREAL is one way of diffusing this moral, intellectual bomb, right? That may go off. And it for me, it works by revealing these faulty philosophies and then making correspondingly logical counter arguments, and to help people make sense. My work is less disciplined than that. But that's okay, right? There's room for a lot of us. So mine is more to look at, it's a little bit more psychological or narrative in intent. So I'm looking at what are the underlying drives toward sort of those now institutionalized ideas, and what are sort of more human approaches to the restoration of the social fabric and our place in nature. So I tend to make emotional arguments, which is okay. right? Which I'm okay with, especially now, right? That our narratives have decayed. That it's okay to use, and this is what I'm going to use tonight, to use stories to help us identify or alienate from certain ways of thinking, and in the process, hopefully, develop compassion for one another. So I want to talk about not TES, not TESCREAL, but sort of my felt corollaries, my versions of these. So one of them is what I call the insulation equation. And the insulation equation is the drive to earn enough money to protect yourself from what you've done to earn money in that way. Right? Or to build enough technology to escape the effects of the technologies you've already built. For most of us, it's just like, I'm going to get a wellness meditation app to help me recover from what all the other apps have done to me, right? And one more thing, just one more thing. And another way of saying that is capitalism. It's really, that's what capitalism comes down to. So as I look at it, that's the easiest way to say it. The net and digital technology as it emerged in the late 1980s was very psychedelic in nature. It was so much so, I was with Timothy Leary the first day he used Mosaic, and he said, "Oh my God, Doug, this is as powerful as acid." More powerful because people don't have to eat it to get high. And what Timothy Leary said about acid, though, back in the 60s was that what determines the quality of your trip is the set and setting that you have when you take it. So the original set and setting back in the day in California, Whole Earth Review, Stuart Brand, psychedelic internet was a set and setting of collective imagination and creativity. Right? What could be unleashed by the collective human imagination? The Gaia hypothesis had just come out from James Lovelock, that it's one planetary organism, the Gaian spirit, and the human beings are the neurons, and we're going to wire ourselves up with this internet, and we're going to be able to think collectively, yay, right? But that set and setting, the problem with it was that it made human beings creative and less predictable, right? Depends who you look at. Once John Barlow came and made his Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace saying governments get away and create a free reign for libertarianism, or whether it was Wired magazine saying there's an investment opportunity here, once people were betting on the internet, instead of seeing the internet as no one wanted to invest in the internet. AT&T was offered the internet for like $3 and they turned it down. Because everyone thought the internet is how television and regular media is going to lose money, not how people are going to make money. If you told your parents in the 80s you were going to become a computer programmer or an internet programmer, they would worry that you were being a professional Dungeons and Dragons player, right? They would worry about you. That's right. But when Wired came and said there's an investment opportunity and people started investing in the net, they no longer were looking to increase novelty and unpredictability. Right? Once you're betting on something, what you want is more certainty, is more predictable outcomes. So the creative, unpredictable, wild possibilities of the net were replaced with a need for probability and control. Right? So the way you do that is take these tools that people were using to make the world weird and use the tools on people to make them more predictable. So that essential kind of reversal happened. And the more we did that, it's interesting. The more the kind of abstraction of digital technology combined with the abstraction of capitalism to sort of reinforce one another, right? The more digital and symbolic you get, the further away from the actual harm on the ground you are. The more capitalist, the more abstracted your financial instrument, right? From money to stocks to derivatives of derivatives and so on, the more distant you are from the harm, from the market that you're actually affecting. So money and technology become these insulating factors, right? How do I insulate myself from the damage I'm creating? And it's why when you take, every study can be disproved now, but there were studies, you take a billionaire and stick them in an MRI machine and show them a picture of a starving baby, the parts of the brain that light up for you and me don't light up for them. They've insulated themselves from that sense of compassion. And they've had to, right? You don't earn $1 billion by being nice to people, right? You have to stop thinking, la, 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 right? So I, for a while, blamed capitalism and money and Wired and all for, look what they've done to my song with the internet. But there's also something intrinsically problematic with technology, or dangerous, or biased. Not wrong, but technology leans towards certain sorts of abstracted behavior. And again, it was Timothy Leary when he was reading Stuart Brand's book on the Media Lab, on Nicholas Negroponte and MIT's Media Lab. I remember I was with him. He was like using a flare pen and marking all over this book. And then as soon as he's done, he slams it and he throws it across the room and he goes, bleh, like he was vomiting. Like, what? And he goes, first, and this is back in the late 80s, first, less than 3% of the names in the index are women. Right? That was early to actually observe something like that. He says, that's how you know they got a problem. I said, what? He goes, they're trying to recreate the womb. That's what they're using. That he said, he was a psychologist. Their mothers were unable to anticipate their every need, and now they want to build technologies that know what they want before they know they want it themselves and bring it to them with no human being. Right? This I call it the womb with a view, which is what they want, right? It's and we all got to experience it a bit with COVID. This not just fear, but for wealthy people in the Hamptons, this was wish fulfillment. I finally have a reason to get a solar antenna on my friggin' Hamptons mansion, right? And build a new office and just to be there all the time and not go back to that city with all sorts of other kinds of people I don't understand, right? It's the same impulse that leads Mark Zuckerberg to want to build the metaverse, this place where nothing happens from the waist down, right? They're running around without their legs. What is that? It's rising above the chrysalis of matter as pure consciousness, where there's no, women and darkness and weirdness and stuff, right? This was the lineage of Francis Bacon, who, when selling empirical science to the church and the court, said that science will let us take nature by the forelock, hold her down, and submit her to our will. That he didn't get canceled for it either. But right, it's a domination fantasy, right? So that's this sort of room with a view quality, which again for me is a more emotional narrative thing than an easy philosophy to lay out. Third thing is what I'm calling the dumbwaiter effect, which is really just our relationship to labor. Thomas Jefferson's dumbwaiter wasn't there to help the enslaved people get the food up they were still huffing and puffing, through tunnels. And it was just so Jefferson and his dinner guests would be spared the indignity of seeing the enslaved person come up. It was to insulate them again from the reality of labor. And that's where, you go to something like AI or supposedly robots replacing labor. You all heard about what was this new Musk robot thing? What was that one called? He just did this demo of these robots, and it was revealed these were not robots. These were remote-controlled puppets. There were people. There were people operating them, and it was having microphones and speaking as them. And that's a great image because, as we in this room know, AI does not replace labor. It just it pushes labor further away from the user. There's still the children going into the mines to get their rare earth metals. There's still the legions of, Filipino women in basements tagging data. There's still the cobalt mining. There's so much labor. I would argue actually more labor. It's just worse labor. It's downskilled labor. Have you ever worked with one of these things even as a user? The AI gets to do the fun stuff, and you have to do all the teaching of the thing. It's like, what happened there? It's like, this is not my idea of a good time. Right? So really, my argument is that these technological advances do not reduce labor. They just push labor further down the food chain. And every time you look at a new automated solution, you know, the touchless T-shirt manufacturing and all, still, where's the cotton coming from? Where's the machine? It's always people. There's always more people down there. You know, and when you actually really get rid of the people, then we could talk about an unemployment problem. What we're really talking about is a shittier jobs problem. So another phenomenon is what I'm calling kind of selfish genes, which is the amorality of this space, an intentional amorality. And the story I tell in the book is about this argument I got in with Richard Dawkins, who was, you know, he called me a moralist, which is weird. We got to talk about what that means. I was trying to bring up, no, because you're a philosopher, you would know what it means. I was bringing up Wittgenstein, because he was saying there's nothing going on here, everything is totally mechanical, and you think there's spirit or soul or meaning or purpose, you're crazy. And I'm like, no, there's other systems. You come from an evidentiary system of meaning. You believe we live in an evidence-based universe with no evidence for that, but you believe, right? It's a presumption that we live in an evidence-based universe, and you work that way. I believe we're in a meaning-based universe, and that meaning matters, and that maybe consciousness preceded matter, rather than there being this big bang that you can't explain, that maybe consciousness preceded matter, and blah, blah, blah. And he was just calling me an idiot, and finally, that I was this thing called a moralist. So then, you know, 10, 15 years later, when I see Dawkins and the other guys who were teasing me on Jeffrey Epstein's plane, I'm like, oh, interesting, right? It's not that they were going to the island to have sex with the girls, right? They were going to TED, but they were funded, right? Everyone was being funded by Epstein. Why is Epstein funding a certain kind of staunch atheist scientist? Because if there's nothing going on here, then it's okay that I have a dormitory of 70 teenagers who I'm going to impregnate over there, right? That's the amorality. That's the sort of Sim City distance that this provides. It's an excuse, right, to be a really shitty, amoral person. You know, it goes back to Bacon. These things are not real. It goes to Hobbes, right? Wasn't it Hobbes who said that you can treat the Native Americans like trees and shrubs? They're just part of nature. You should destroy trees and shrubs too, right? Just clear cut them the way you would clear cut a forest. It's like, I don't know if I want to really clear cut either, but I understand what he was trying to say, and it's not good. Another emotional, again, I'm trying to describe them as emotional narrative drives, is what I call pedal to the metal, which is sort of this domination idea. It's all based in kind of Aristotle's narrative arc, beginning, middle, end. You keep your eyes on the prize. The very 20th century narrative, political narrative. Eyes on the prize, march together, get to the top of the hill. We're going to beat the enemy and vanquish them, and then our day today. You know, that mentality, which, you know, someone like Rianne Eisler would say started with metallurgy. You know, when we got metal, we made swords and chains so that we can enslave people and slice people. But I look at it, you know, as so much technology is used in that way. The stuff that we were taught was here to be more efficient was actually here to dominate people, like the assembly line at the beginning of the industrial age. It was not to make more goods faster. It was to disconnect the worker from the skills. But there used to be a shoemaker who could make a shoe. He had a craft, or she had a craft. The problem if the worker has a craft is they can demand wages. Where you want to go to the Home Depot parking lot and get some, undocumented aliens and bring them in and have them, pay them $12 or less an hour to make your shoes. So the way you do that is you create an assembly line. You teach each person one task in 15 minutes, put this nail in that thing and pass it to the next dude. And none of them know how it works. That's what the assembly line, was for. And this has engendered an understanding of business that's just all about colonialism, this inexorable pull forward. That this. It's like people. God, when I got mugged in front of my building in Park Slope, and I posted to the lefty sweetie pie email list, Park Slope parents. I got mugged on 7th and this happened. And I got 2 emails right away from people angry that I had posted where I had been mugged because it could negatively influence their property values. And I was like, whoa, you mean you're going to sell your home now? You're leaving? And they said, no, we're not leaving, but the arm on my mortgage is going to end and I need to refinance at a higher valuation in order to stay in the house. That's the pedal to the metal that capitalism requires, right? You need exponential growth in order just to stay still. So then you end up, arguing, and they end up arguing, this is back to more the philosophical side of it, you argue that this is some kind of creative destruction, that you're going to disrupt this thing in order to move the next thing and disrupt that thing. It's not creative destruction, it's destructive destruction. It's destroying a marketplace and replacing it with something else, and then that dies. I remember when Clear Channel took over the FM radio dial, it didn't come back, right? It's you destroy, once you destroy the kind of the ecosystem, it goes away. But the disruption that they're talking about, that tech bros are talking about, is not disruptive. It's conservative. It's reactionary. I remember Kevin Kelly wrote a book in the 90s called 10 Rules of the New Economy. It was not 10 rules of the new economy. It was 10 rules for preserving the old economy in a new media environment. But this is not, if it was disruption, they wouldn't just disrupt restaurants, books, travel, they would disrupt the underlying operating system of capitalism. But they don't. The minute they have an app or an idea or a platform, what do? They run to Daddy at Goldman Sachs. Daddy, I want my IPO. I want my IPO. Right? That's reactionary. That's conservative. That's not anything new, right? Instead, what they do is they have to accelerate at all costs. Right? And that's partly it's accelerationism, but it's even old-fashioned accelerationism. It's just that you've got to keep moving faster and faster just in order to stay still, and then questioning that acceleration, like I did in that Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus book, which was not saying we should throw rocks at it. It was saying, how did we get here that the good guys who were Google against big bad Yahoo are now getting rocks thrown at them? How did they turn into bad guys? How did growth become the enemy of prosperity? But questioning any of this means you are an enemy of the people, right? And that's when, or the market, I guess. And that's what they consider me now. I'm like that bad guy doing the bad thing because I'm questioning. Oh, you don't like tech anymore. Oh, and why Rushkoff's turned against tech. I haven't turned against tech. I've turned against you. It's just, this is personal. Oh, that's good. Another one is to go meta. Right? We kind of talked a little about this, the idea of going meta, or the way we went from Web 1 to Web 2 to Web 3, right? Web 1 is a bunch of websites. Web 2, you aggregate all the websites, right? Web 3, now you're going to rise above social media to the other thing. And now, this exponentialism, and you talk about it too, is, again, for me, it's emotional. It's about needing to get one order of magnitude above everybody else. Peter Thiel justifies it with the philosophy of Renée, bastardized philosophy of Renée Girard, who was this guy who talked about the scapegoat, and we have a scapegoat in order to feel superior. Thiel sees it as a good thing. Right? So, I get it. So you turn everybody of society into the scapegoat and you rise one order of magnitude above them. When you're starting a business, if you're not 10x bigger than everything else, then it's not worth doing. It's got to somehow, what is 10x? It's an order of magnitude. That's what it means to go from 0 to 1, which is the title of his book. How do you get one thing above everybody else? Really what they're asking to do, though, is to go meta on humanity itself, right? That's sort of the Ray Kurzweil dream. I remember this was the big fight I got in. It's what led to my whole Team Human enterprise. I was on this panel with Ray Kurzweil, and he was talking about how evolution is really just has always been the story of information moving towards higher states of complexity. So it went from atoms to molecules to organelles to organisms to humans and human society. But once computers and digital technology is more complex than us, information will migrate there and we can fade into the distance and accept our own extinction as just passing the evolutionary torch to our successor. And I made this argument, oh no, but human beings are special. You know, a human being can contend with ambiguity and ambivalence and maintain paradox over time. A human being can watch a David Lynch movie and not understand what it means and still experience that as pleasure, right? What is that? A computer can't do that. And Kurzweil, I said, so the human beings deserve a place in the digital future. And Kurzweil said, oh, Rushkoff, you're just saying that because you're human. Right? Like it's hubris. And that's when I said, fine, I'm on Team Human. Guilty, right? And then, and I kind of then got into the whole idea of humanity as a team sport and all that. So it served me well, but then there's a couple more ones to push a button. I called it, which was based on a story when I was online watching the January 6th riots with a couple of tech bros who I thought I was having a conference with, but we were all watching this instead. And one of them said, "What if you could push a button and have all those people disappear? Would you do it?" You imagine? What kind of thought is that, right? It's this philosophy of technology finally as a kind of a Skinner box, and they're fine with that. It's what Elon Musk does by creating a total propaganda environment, in the sense that Jacques Ellul would call it, the total propaganda environment of Twitter, where the air you breathe in Twitter, so to speak, is composed of a certain philosophy. You can't go there anymore. It's the universe is tilted, and it will. You can't help it when even if you're having your own conversation, when the environment that you're living in, inhabiting, seems to go against your own sensibilities. Eventually, your heart and mind will go there. But it's this push a button idea is more the idea that we can control and repress human beings with technology, right? It's the idea of using tech on people, and we reduce their humanity in the process. And even the Tescriel-themed saviors, bless their hearts, have the same dynamic. Like you hear, consider the phrase humane technology. What does that call to mind? For me, it calls to mind the cage-free chicken eggs, right? We're going to build technology that treats the humans more humanely. But the dynamic is still the technology being used on the people rather than people using the technology. We're living inside the Skinner box, and that's where they feel safe, because we're inside that thing that they're controlling rather than with them, right? Hold her down by the hair, right? Hold her down by the tweet, or whatever it is that you've got. Then finally, this idea of we are as gods, which is this Burning Man sense of. I was still shocked. I'm still regularly shocked. You can give a tech bro 5 hits of acid, and what you get? A tech bro on acid. Wouldn't you have thunk, right? You give it that they would somehow get it. They don't, right? Set and setting. These are amplifiers. They don't have the. I always thought the plant had it. Maybe the plant would. They'd give them ayahuasca, but they seem to be able to do that too. They go to Burning Man, they do the substance, and they still come out assholes. Right, and this is because they think of themselves as gods who can solve problems with their superpowers. This is why Elon Musk identifies with, Robert Downey Jr.'s character, Iron Man. He is stark, and when they do come to solve problems, they are total, original IP, clear-cut forests. There's this one guy from Stanford who's developing regenerative villages, right? So it's a stack. You know what a stack? It's a software stack for building villages. You just got to go to a clean forest, clear cut it, and spawn your beautiful city. It's like Neom in the Saudi Arabian regenerative renewable energy city that they want to build out in the desert, which is going to work just fine as long as they can find a place to take the 20,000 Bedouins who've been living sustainably on that land for 10,000 years and somehow get them away, right? So it's always this idea of because they're gods, they're going to build a new universe, a new city, a new thing. You can't they can't continue with what's already here. And it's partly because they want the IP, right? They come back from the rainforest, not with mushrooms, but wanting to develop an analog of the mushroom that they can patent, right? That's their psychedelic business plan. But everything they do has got to be somehow brand new. It's an X Prize. It's not distributed solutions around the world for doing things better. It's, no, here's my $100 million that I'm going to give to the one person who has the one, geoengineering solution to solve for climate change. And I'm going to profit off it, right? So it's kind of solving things ex nihilo. Is that how you say it? Ex nihilo? Does someone know? Is Latin? You know what I mean? It's like as if there was nothing there, right? It's if there was nothing there. It's like the new urbanist architects who read Jane Jacobs and think, oh, I'm going to do Jane Jacobs in this empty lot. It's like, no, it took 100 years to develop. You didn't read. Yeah. So they basically try to solve things as if there was no one there before. I'm going to go to a neighborhood where nothing's happening. I'm going to open up an art store, and then what do you mean there's nothing happening? Oh, there's projects there. Right, there's people there, right? It's always like they don't think there's anything there before. Their great fear, though, which is sort of some of the topic of tomorrow, their great fear, though, is supposedly AI, right? And they don't understand what AI is. They don't. I was at one of these retreats with these guys, one of the co-founders of one of the top 5 social networks. And he comes up to me and says, Doug, you've been making a lot of Medium posts about AI. Aren't you worried? It's like, what? Well, you're saying negative things about AI. Aren't you worried that when AIs are in charge, they're going to look at what you read and, come for you? It's like, yeah, I hadn't really thought of that. He goes, well, I've excluded all talk of AI from everything I write for just that reason. And I said to him, well, if AIs are so smart, aren't they going to be able to infer from your selective exclusion of anything about AI exactly how you feel about them? And he goes, oh, fuck. Right? And the beauty of AI is that from their perspective, AI is going to do to them what they've been doing to us. Right? AI is going meta on humanity in that sense. If you use McLuhan's idea that each new medium turns the prior medium into its content, right? Like the internet turned television into its content, then the AIs are going to turn humans into their content, at least as far as those guys are concerned. That their fear is that AI is their comeuppance, that it's going to go meta on them, right? And there's no escape for them. All you can do is kind of run faster, right? And they are having what I would say is the bad trip, right? We're all having a bit of a bad trip because we've been living on what Timothy Leary called a psychedelic substrate for 40 years with a set and setting of command, control, extraction, domination, and surveillance. So we are bad tripping, right? How do we get out of that? I would say it's not that hard. It's not that hard. 12 steps. Look at 12 steps. What do you do? What do you do, right? You surrender. First, you surrender. There's a higher power. There's something else going on here. If once you go, there's something else going on here. You don't have to call it God. You can call it love, spirit, sex, eros, chaos, whatever. There's something else here, right? There's something else. It's not all on the quantized things, right? If you auto-tune people, you end up missing the stuff, right? The computers understand the ticks of the clock, but the human beings live in the duration between those ticks. That they can't find us there, right? In that space. That's where reality is happening, right? So the way back is, I think, to use the hacker ethos that the tech bros bastardized, but retrieve the pro-human, pro-social elements of it. So the temptation for activists, and I fall into it all the time, the temptation is for us to say, okay, how do we get people to, right? How do we get people to be nicer? How do we get people to do mutual aid? How do we get people? But once you're saying, how do we get people to, you're in tech bro land. Right? How do you get people? No, you stop. That's the 20th century. That's TV. That's manipulation. That's persuasion. It's not about getting people to do anything. Right? That's engineering humans. That's memes. Right? That's humane tech. It's, oh, we're going to make a Netflix show, and that's going to get people to, no. Instead, I think what we have to do is consider how do we engender a more social, human society that values agency? So we work on the soil rather than the plant. We work on the environment rather than the people, right? We do that through our behaviors. So I came up with 4, and I know I'm at the end of my time here. I came up with 4 interventions that are, in a sense, antitheses of the Tescrial mindset planks. One is what we all do, what New School is about, is denaturalize power. Denaturalized power means really simply recognizing, being able to distinguish between the real world and social construction. So a simple example would be, I was on Jake Tapper talking about AI. And it was one of those days when I didn't care about AI. You know, dude, you go back and forth. Some days I'm like, oh my God. Some days I'm like, it's nothing. This was one of the days when I was like, I so don't give a fucking shit about this. And I'm getting on CNN to be, alarmist. Because they read something I wrote where I was alarmist the day before. So they're trying to get me alarmed. And finally, Jake was like, well, what about the unemployment problem? And I said, I don't know. What about the unemployment solution? I don't want a job. When did jobs come from? Where did jobs come from? Jobs happened in late medievalism along with the charter monopoly. People used to create value and sell things themselves. They only had to get a job when charter monopolies made it impossible to have your own business, and you started to punch the clock. That's when they put the clock on the tower in the medieval village. And we became wage. We started working by the time rather than by the unit. So the only people that did that were enslaved people. Now we're all like, so I bring that up, but that's denaturalizing power. It's a matter of basically saying, since when? Right? Well, don't you need a car to get to work? Well, why do I need a car to get to work? Because GM lobbied for towns to be put far. It's like, let's denaturalize power, right? To see it as a creation rather than as the way things are. Once you've denaturalized power, I think that will help do the second one, which is trigger agency, right? Which is and I mean widespread human triggering agency. I mean, for me, it was a technological insight. It was when I was saving my first file at the computer lab at Princeton. The graduate student, she asked, do you want to save this as a read-only file or a read-write file? I'm like, what's a read-write file? A read-write file is a file someone else can open and read and edit. And I'm like, a read-write? And I start looking at the world saying, wait a minute, television is read-only. What if it was read-write? Money is read-only. Why isn't it read-write? There's a law against it, but the Torah is read-only, not read-write. What? All these things have been declared as read-only, but we live in they could be read-write. Right? So that's sort of triggering agency. Once you've triggered someone's agency to try to rewrite the codes by which we live, they're going to need compadres, right? They're going to need comrades. So that's my third one, is re-socialize the people. I used to call it re-socialize people, but now I do the people just for that little, Marxist edge to it. Re-socialize the people, right? So, and that's really simple. I mean, the nice story to tell people to help them re-socialize is the one I tell about. I had to hang a picture of my daughter's graduation picture in my house. I don't have a drill to get the thing in the wall, and my first impulse is go to Home Depot, get a minimum viable product drill, right? Some rechargeable piece of crap that I'll use once, stick in the garage, take it out, it'll never work again, and I'll throw it away. So I've sent kids into the rare earth mines to get it. I've done the carbon footprint, and now I've thrown it out where some other kids are going to, pick at some giant junk heap in Brazil to find the renewable part and sell it to Apple so they can be green, right? It's like, what the? Or I can go to my neighbor Bob's house and say, Bob, can I borrow your drill? Why is that so much harder, right? And that's harder because once I ask Bob for his drill, then he's going to want to come to the barbecue at my house, or they're going to invite me over for something. We're going to become friends, right? And then the other neighbor's going to want to come over because they're going to see that we're friends. And then he's going to ask me to tutor his daughter in algebra, and she's kind of cute, but no, I don't want to work, and it's another thing. And it's like I kind of miss tutoring actually because my daughter's in college now. But no. right? I'm going to go to the store and buy it. So what I'm trying to do is to help sort of re-socialize people, help people understand the tech bros are wrong. They're misinterpreting Darwin. This is not survival of the fittest. That if you actually read the Darwin, he is marveling page after page at the way species cooperate and collaborate with each other in order to ensure mutual survival. I was taught that the trees compete for sunlight in the forest. That was my middle school lesson. They don't. They share nutrients with each other through a network of mycelia under the ground who actually get a little service fee for their transactions. It's true. They do. So the story we're being told about nature is false. It's there to preserve, right, this artificial narrative about extractive capitalism and not to describe the real world. And the fourth one, which is the weirdest one and the most human one, is cultivate awe. And awe is a human state. But when people have an experience of awe, which just means kind of experiencing the world as bigger than yourself is connected to some other giant whatever thing, your cytokine response changes, meaning your immune system gets more balanced, your generosity goes up for hours, if not days. They've done a lot of experiments. You have awe, and then you will give more money to a beggar or somebody who's asking for it. You end up more grounded, more calibrated, and more sort of non-individual when you've had awe. So those four things: denaturalize power, trigger agency, re-socialize the people, and cultivate awe. And that's part of why, I would argue, part of why we're here together, right? We are convening here together to see that we are not alone. We are not alone. I would argue most people kind of get this, if not intellectually, certainly intuitively, which is why they're acting out in all these strange ways. This does not make sense. So what we can do instead, and I encourage you to do this tomorrow as you hear more about Tescriel and the various bunker mentalities, is laugh at it. Laugh at it. It makes it small. This is comedy, not tragedy. They are pathetic. Right? And then work together towards something entirely more fun, wet, social, sexy, compassionate, and connected. All right, thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Douglas. That was absolutely fantastic and hilarious and brilliant. So we are going to transition to a Q&A at this point. So hopefully you have plenty of questions. I can already see some hands coming up. And since we're recording this, I think I should probably share the microphone. No, okay, that's fine. But maybe I'll start off with a question real fast.
Your part's not recorded because you didn't.
Good.
So it's all, you can state your true nature.
Yeah, you can be candid, yes. So I guess so first of all, this term Tescriel was mentioned on a few occasions. So for those of you who aren't familiar, it basically is just it refers to this cluster of ideologies from transhumanism to longtermism, and the term was introduced as part of a critique of these ideologies, which are quite pervasive and influential within Silicon Valley, and have, at least the argument goes, have played an integral role in launching, sustaining, and accelerating the current race to build AGI, or artificial general intelligence. And so Douglas's notion of the mindset overlaps very significantly with these ideologies. And in fact, this term was initially sort of developed by Timnit Gebru, a computer scientist, and me in a collaboration. But Douglas's book was published months before we even began our collaboration. So he was talking about the idea before we stumbled upon it. And so having said that, my question is this still okay? Good. Do you think that there is a realistic chance of effectively countering this movement of the mindset? And if not, so I mean, these are powerful forces that we're dealing with. Individuals, they're tech billionaires who are infatuated, enamored with transhumanism and longtermism, this particular techno-utopian vision of the far future of humanity, and that is what motivates, at least in part, projects like SpaceX and Neuralink and so on and so on. So they're powerful figures, and you mentioned that we're not alone. Surveys show that for example, like a majority of Americans oppose these development of these large language models, ChatGPT, and are frustrated with AI, and they don't give their consent to these companies to do what they're doing. But there is a sense of helplessness, and this is something that I struggle with a lot as a critic of these ideologies. So, what are your thoughts on that? And if ultimately there is nothing that can be done because this is just a juggernaut that is beyond our control, how bad do you think the future could get? Thank you.
Yeah. There's a few assumptions embedded in there. I mean, so one, I don't think we can effectively battle these forces at scale. I think they are abstractions, they operate at scale, and they are the home team on the level of scale. You know, corporations, feudalist governments, like we're about to move into, are operate at a different scale than humans. But humans can work in distributed ways to tip reality to our benefit. You know, when you were talking, the first thing I was thinking to do, partly because I'm in an academic setting, was, well, you know, what did artists and thinkers do during feudalism? Where were they? You know, and that sort of sounds depressing, but whatever they were doing, they sustained a thread. Somehow Maimonides got to me, right? They sustained a thread through these periods, and we can do the same. And I would argue the things we would do to thread humanism through a dehumanized techno-feudal future are the same kinds of things we would do to counteract one, to rebalance against one, or to prevent one. That we almost don't need to strategize. So then when you started talking about we're not giving our consent for AI, then the first thing that occurred to me, because I've been reading and exploring into the world of, I don't know what you call it, new sexuality, is how much conversation and activity there is around consent, right? And consent, I remember when I first heard about consent, it sounded kind of boring and stupid. You're like, oh, I'm going to ask you this. Consent is the key. Consent is the key to the whole thing. You know, in sort of sex rules now, consent is not just a person saying okay. Consent has to be a person vigorously agreeing. Vigorously agreeing. Yes, please, is consent, right? So if we start operating with consent, that notion of consent in our daily lives, in the little things we do, the way we deal with our kids, the way we deal with our lovers, the way we deal with our students, then that's going to change our expectation and tolerance for lack of consent on other scales. You know, so I guess for me, and I know it sounds a little bit like a cop-out politically, but I'm getting really into how are we interacting with other people in our communities, very locally. The more that we are interdependent, the less we're depending on Walmart and China and Tesla and whoever. And that is real. If you did 70% less economic activity with those bros, they are 70% less powerful. They just are, you know. And then they'll start looking at, well, how do we make growing food illegal? How do we then that's when the real war starts, right? But it'll happen. I feel like it'll happen slowly as we redevelop our. I mean, let's put the social back into socialism, right? Let's minimize the ism and maximize the social, which is just borrowing, sharing, mutual aid. You don't need a central government or a Politburo to do that. You just need to start taking care of your neighbors and friends. And I mean, I know it sounds a little new agey or something, or unsatisfying, or Mr. Rogers, but I think it's the fact that we frame it that way is to our detriment. That's what they've done. That's what they've done, is to make genuine human peer-to-peer empowerment, the original promise of the web, sound like some little, you know, pansy bullshit where that's the one thing they're afraid of. That's why they made iPhones. It's not us phones or us pads, it's iPhones, right? It's to alienate us from one another because we can't establish rapport with each other. We don't even know how to make eye contact. And if you can't establish rapport, then you can't build solidarity.
Thank you so much. That was great. Yes, so questions, please speak up. Also, okay, great. Yeah, I was going to say, don't be shy if you have questions. It's a friendly group of people. So we'll start in the back, I think on the left. I think you were the first person to raise your hand, yeah?
I wanted to say, when you talked about, they looked at a whole bunch of people being eliminated, I forget the concept, but it made me think of that lovely Charles Dickens book, A Christmas Carol, where Scrooge, the rich guy, who inhumanly said, talks about reducing the surplus population, like the fortune told, regular diet. And what made me wonder was, you couldn't doubt Elon Musk, I can change that, I sympathize. But what about trying to somehow appeal to, maybe there's a microcosm of humanity somehow, because in that whole book about Scrooge, for the rich, the art, he might as well have been a billionaire, billionaire, much like now. Try to appeal to their humanity. Try to, instead of simply your appreciation, make fun of them.
Mm.
So like, in order to have a disruptive future, try to get them to see the rest of us as being work. That's the kind of thing that I mentioned it to them. To the good and fun growth.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if I if I could 20 minutes alone with Jeffrey Epstein, could I have somehow brought out the human deep in there? Maybe. I mean, I don't have access, right? I've had access to some and engaged with them and seen moments of that sort of, neurolinguistic programming when you get them to reframe for a second. I've gotten the moments of doubt. I've seen their eyes slowly unfocus for a second and tried to pounce into the cognitive dissonance. And I've converted a couple temporarily. The problem is it takes so much integration that they don't have. So you get them to recognize climate change, and then they're like, oh, so I'm going to do a geoengineering project. It's like, oh, no. Oh, I'm going to do a new raise. I'm going to do an IPO for that. Oh, no. So there's like so much unwinding that for me, it's become no longer about accepting their roles on their thrones and convincing the king to do the right thing, but just removing responsibility from their domain, right? And it just seems I'd rather help 10 million people remove themselves from Twitter than help the head of Twitter stop being cruel to what's her name, the singer. To Grimes, to stop having surveillance people follow her around. It's like, no, I mean, yes, if you want to put me in a room, or me and Oprah in a room with Elon Musk, and a couple of tantrikas or something, maybe, we could convert him, but but I do agree that Survival of the Richest, that book I wrote in the horror and despair of seeing the most powerful people I had ever met in my life be that idiotic. And it seemed important to say, yo, don't be scared of these people. They're not smart. Stop idolizing. Stop. I know kids in college who still say, I want to be the next Elon Musk. I want to be the next this. No. These are better off objects of ridicule than objects of our admiration. But afterwards, I was thinking, I may have disempowered myself from being able to engage with them now the way I may have before. Peter Thiel used to invite me to stuff, and I would just be like, bleh. And now he doesn't. And now I'm thinking, oh, maybe if I went, maybe I could be the one, who gets him to dismantle Palantir. You never know.
All right, yes, next question to the back.
Good. Thank you very much, sir. I really enjoyed your conversation. I do have a question, maybe more rooted in the historical context. In the book, the biography for Steve Jobs, like one guy's son talked about Jobs' his young journey when he was in Silicon Valley and when the entire, I guess, his friends and him were reading Timothy Lear's book, Turn On, Doing, and Drop Out, and how like they were high on acid. And Jobs talked about in the book how this is very important to the roots of Apple and how he thought about Apple to be a company that's deeply rooted in counterculture and championing the tech as a tool to fight against the big growth. And this is also manifested in their famous ad in 1984 when
Right.
they throw IBM out of the play. So somewhere in this transition, I was just wondering, where did that original vision of Steve Jobs go wrong? And you being so close to Silicon Valley, I was wondering, even today, Apple being like, their entire ideology on like sustainability and because like I think even Jobs himself talked about, oh, like it's stupid to ask people about the opinion of Apple products because we should teach them what's a good tech product. And so I was just wondering, this entire 3-4 decades, where do you think this vision got disrupted and how tech became what it is today?
I mean, in some ways, I look at Apple less as the first digital company than the last television company. It was so much about branding and persuasion and image, and even the 1984 commercial. It was, the same way I look at Trump as the last television. Reality TV is sort of the last gasp of television. He's the last television candidate. He's not the first internet candidate. That's Musk, I guess, is that or something, or we haven't seen it yet. But so where it went wrong is it became obsolete. It kind of lost it. I mean, if you talk to Jobs, interestingly enough, I mean, the reason why it's called Apple, when it has a bite, that's the Garden of Eden apple. That's what that's supposed to be. And he said in a few, and I forgot where these articles are, but you can do a search for them. He said that on some big crazy acid trip, he made a deal with the devil. And that's why he says he got the cancer. That's why they took him. That he made a deal with the devil to have Apple work like that. And that was the bite of the apple. It's sort of this Promethean, he had a Promethean, again, we are as gods. They saw themselves as gods. He was like a cult leader. He was like the Werner Erhard of Silicon Valley. In that, he's the guy that started EST, this big sort of, in some ways, very positive self-improvement cult, but it came out of the self-improvement and even the Cosmism. It was the hot tubs of Esalen where the Russians had come and talked about longevity and life extension and robots and all. And folks like Jobs were in those same hot tubs going, oh, great. The personal computer will be the liberation of humans. But he was aware of the danger of doing that as well. But where it went wrong, again, that's what I was asking. It's either that it became too much of a business. It was no longer about the liberal arts of it. It was the business, or it was this sort of not fully recognizing the biases of digital technology towards abstraction and dehumanization.
Great, excellent questions. Thank you so much. Romy, next.
Thank you so much. Brilliant. Love just hearing you say what needs to be said. So thank you. Two questions. So first is like, are they really all bros? And just an invitation to unpack that in terms of a particular configuration of a normative vision of the human that is tied to a racial gender consensus logic. Maybe. So this is a question like
Yeah.
inviting and also like references to sexual violence and later to the bros, what we what we're talking about there. And then the second question is around the ties, even maybe in its kind of seemingly liberatory phase of the internet and
Right. I mean, one gender race configuration, yes, times 1,000. You know, and Elon Musk is the. I mean, if you look at his history, the politics of South Africa and where he and his family were in that, you know, and the kinds of organizations that he belonged to then or belongs to now, it is white supremacy, eugenicist understandings of the world. Even when you like an Avengers movie where a character can snap their fingers and have half the universe die in order to make room for the rest, and you see that as a positive fantasy, yeah, it is straight eugenics. And sadly, you know, an Oracle spreadsheet tends toward eugenics. Right? There's a Talmudic law against counting people. You're not allowed to count people. Even if you want to assemble a minion, you have to sort of see, is it about 10? You can't count people. Because once you're counting them, you're dehumanizing them. So when we have a spreadsheet database-driven society, you know, the first use of the IBM punch cards was Auschwitz. I mean, yeah, that's when it becomes easy. So yes, it's a digital understanding of humanity is intrinsically eugenicist. And now that they have a digital understanding of the genome, they can exercise that. They can actually realize it and use any kind of justification. Oh, there'll be less cerebral palsy or something. You know, it's like, whoa, we are as gods, right? It goes to that. They're just like you clear cut the forest. It's the closest thing, and I don't like to use the word evil, but basically that's what it is. So yes, the second thing, interesting, I always had a swords to plowshares understanding of the internet. You know, swords to plowshares. It's a sort of biblical thing. You're going to take the swords and melt them down and make them into plowshares, and there'll be no war no more. I was talking with Tyson Yunkaporta, who's a indigenous Australian scholar. And he said there's a belief among some of the people that he's been with that you even once you have made iron ore or a metal into a weapon, it will always be in it. You can't ever melt it down enough for it not to be a weapon. And I know that sounds a little hokey spiritual, whatever, but I think those of us at the beginning, again, we were ex nihilo. Here's a new toy. It's a brand new computer that I've taken out of the box. It's a new cyber cafe. I'm the first one here. It's the internet. We're going to talk about Star Trek and rave and psychedelics and build a new society without realizing that we were sitting not on the shoulders of giants, but on the detritus of a military machine. That the video games we play are war simulations. That the whole anonymity and the non-local communication and all this, it's like text messages are basically war commands. So without an understanding, that's why I became a media theorist. Without an understanding of the biases of the media that you're using, you're going to be used by them. That's why I always would say program or be programmed. That the devices will be programming you. The same way a person using Adobe Photoshop, you can see when Adobe Photoshop has used them, right? As opposed to a real artist who knows how to use the tool, you can just see the software there. I mean, that's the way that's what happened to our society. So yeah, we ended up becoming fractured and militant and afraid, and because we didn't fully recognize that. I mean, even those people like me who knew the military thing, we thought, revolution, liberation, we're going to liberate these tools. They don't want them anymore. The social agenda of the net is so much bigger than the military one that we're just going to, push them out. But we didn't recognize, I think, that the echo of the original purpose of the technology remains somehow embedded in it. And unless you're really consciously singing a different song, we just didn't know. We didn't know politics. We had rave culture. It was political. We're going to a parking lot at night and putting up speakers, charging nothing and dancing and doing ecstasy. We've taken over, we've claimed a public space for our activity. We didn't understand it was political. So, you're going to give us a venue? Oh, that's nice. With bathrooms? Ooh. We go and do that, and we didn't realize what we were giving up. Same with the net. Are you going to pay me for my program instead of it all being shareware? You mean I'm going to get to show my dad that I actually amounted to something, that I'm not just working for free to make shareware for other losers? Yeah, I'll take some money. And thus, down the road we went.
Great. Thanks so much for the question. Yes?
So Douglas, you came and spoke at the second startup at Razorfish back in the 90s. And so I feel like we've been in this, I've seen you at personal democracy forum, and there's been like this ongoing diagnosis of the problem. So here we are right now in this presumably, arguably very precipitous election situation. And I'm a practitioner, but I feel it's so important that we have this sort of praxis and theory dance. So that's why I'm here. I'm not a philosopher. I'm a practicing philosopher. So two questions. One, I'm just curious about can you bring it back into, and I love the denaturing power in your list, it's great. What about now, in the next 3 weeks? Things look pretty fucked up right now. So what practical advice, given your cosmic brain, would you say, right? And then the second question is, what I didn't hear was, there's a good debate right now that what we're dealing with is a sort of reinsertion of this sort of patriarchy in the same way that it jumped from older religions into Christianity, and now it's like from traditional Christianity into a new trad path, trad orthodox, etc. This renewed, digitized, patriarchal belief system versus matriarchy, versus what Me Too represents. And in that, we have conspirituality, which is this thing where there's other people making claims to spirituality, to this social togetherness, but because we're in this American system that is so hyper individualist, can anything social come out of this, or where else do we need to be going or asking for help from? So just one practical advice for right now, and then what about this thing where the spirituality claims, or the negotiation and debate within, when that's partly what's happening in sort of LA as the epicenter of New Age conspirituality, and Austin, Texas, and all of the stuff that conspirituality trackers have been pointing out, which I feel is kind of this other dimension to the Tesriel movement, because Elon Musk is doing ayahuasca and going to Austin and talking. It's all, these things are deeply interwoven. So that's the philosophical question. Praxis question is, what about now in the next 3 weeks?
Vote.
Microphone.
Voting would help. Really, people don't, vote. Honestly, God, breathe. People forget. Breathe. Put your feet on the ground. When your feet are on the ground, you get a very different set of cues to your body. You don't feel safe with your feet. So many of us do the internet and stuff with our feet off the ground, so we're floating out in that thing, and then we succumb to the ontological relativism and the panic. And put your feet on the ground and breathe. It really helps. I sometimes feel like I am a death doula. That rather than providing the keys or way out of the mess, I'm helping people metabolize the trauma and sadness associated with being in a dying civilization. This is sort of the high holiday time of year for Jews, and there's this poem that we read in high holidays, which has always sounded so awful to me, called the Unatana Tokef, where they say, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur it is written, who will live and who will die, who will be sick, and it's sounds so awful that God's writing it all down, he's going to seal it, and it's done. But at the very end of the poem, there's 2 lines that say, but only through only through compassion and mutual aid can we soften the severity of the decree. So it's like, so the shit's gonna fucking happen, man. It's, the Titanic's gonna go down, and if I am guilty of playing in the band on the deck of the Titanic as the boat goes down, what more beautiful thing could a musician do, right? And in that process, can we transform that into something else, right? Worst case, as I see it, we're in that moment in Torah when we leave Egypt and we get the 40 years in the desert, right? Or maybe we're even worse, we're going to get the 400 years of slavery under Pharaoh. Maybe we're moving into that one, that we've, gone into that narrow place, that automated frame of mind. And we will be programmed by our AIs for a few hundred years until we wake up again, And it's sad, but again, the job is to keep the torch, right? Is to just keep that flame alive, to try to create pathways for continuity of the human project, no matter what else is happening. If we do it in secret or we do it in public, if we do it in low culture, if we do it in high culture, but we do it through our moment-to-moment interaction. So when you say, what do we do now? I take the word now very seriously. So now, that's all you have is now, right? I wrote a whole book on that, present shock, when everything happens at once. It's like, that now is the moment that we're not acknowledging. That's when we humans have the home field advantage. Twitter is catching up with you, right? Facebook is trying to determine your future. We are the only ones, the humans are the only ones living in the now. So seize that now. Make real eye contact with other people in your life. Breathe with people. When I do talks for high school and college people, I say, I want you to try to take 20 seconds this week and just be with another person and do nothing. 20 seconds. That's all it used to be a day we would take, right? 20 seconds and look into someone's eyes, just be with them 20 seconds. So that now. As far as the whole new traditionalist, blah, 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 I believe that there is a deep yearning for spirituality. And that even guys like Vance, what's his name? I was going to say Vance Packard. Uncle Vance, what's his name? J.D. Vance, right. J.D. Vance, you see, that's good. I block him. Even J.D. Vance, I can see through it. He just wants something to hang on to, like a strap to hang on to on the subway, right? So he's reaching for just a piece of shit. He just wants that. So people are looking for that, and I think what we need to do again is make religion and spirituality more social. Find a chaver, find a group, find a dozen people that you can just be with, and you don't need the content of spirituality. Because there are a lot of people, well-meaning people, the meta-modernists and the rebel wisdoms and the all those guys, and they are smarter than most of us, smarter than me certainly. They know every philosopher, and they can talk about the meta crisis and the climate thing, and it sounds very compelling. But again, they're trying to make meaning for us, where what we need to do is to make meaning together. And that's social. I do. Whatever happens, it's going to be okay. We have each other. You look at the worst examples of what happened. Look at the read Collective Courage about Black mutual aid from 16 whatever to the present. They invented local currency. They invented the funds for people's funerals. Look at the celebrations that Jews did in Auschwitz when they're making tinfoil menorahs in friggin' Auschwitz. It's like, no, in the darkest of times, we can still, be there for one another in a profound way. And it doesn't have to get that dark. If we can choose to be there for each other now, rather than wait another decade of this horror, we'll start repairing that much sooner and go less deep down into the abyss. You can choose to do the first step of AA without, being in a jail cell, right? You don't need to hit that bottom. Should we do one more?
Yeah, great. So further questions? Okay, so we've got, is it just one? Are there any other questions? Again, please feel free to not be shy.
Making you think of virtual breath when somebody said to them, will there be singing in this dark time? He said, yes, there will be singing about this dark time. And of course, we've seen that as African American
Great, thank you so much. Yes, so this will be the last question, and then we have food or fare, whatever it's called, over here. So yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much for the talk. I guess, how do I put this? So you mentioned the example of like, say, right, utopianism. There's a threat of humanity being passed. Right. Also, the example of one's oars have been have been snipped into, somehow that kind of bottom line remains in the potential of the thing. And I mean, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, right, like, I guess if you look through history, slavery's always been around. Right. The events of, like, say, capitalism or these new forms of power, it's always somehow bringing the bottom line even lower. And the task seems to always have been, right, how do we not fall completely into it, right? How do we put ourselves back just a little? Is this process of pulling back even catching up at the rate that it's going down? I guess it's something like my question, right? What do you make of the fact that, seems, maybe I'm very biased, right? It doesn't seem like there has been real positive progress in the opposite direction. Yeah, I was just wondering if you have.
Right. Well, you're accurately describing one civilization's colonial narrative. Read David Graeber's book. What's the one called? Right, Dawn of Everything, which has examples of civilizations other than ours, right? That lasted for long periods of time and had alternatives. It's very easy for us, particularly in the West, to see like the thing that started in wherever, kind of Greece through Europe and Charlemagne to America, as the one sort of the narrative of civilization and the Enlightenment and all these steps. It's just one branch of the tree. It's one, and it's a sick branch that may or may not be able to sustain itself. But no, we'll see what happens. But luckily we're not the only one. And throughout history there have been many, many, many other ways of organizing. And as far as the ore, according to most of the data of the indigenous people in Australia, if you like bury it for like 40 years or something, then you can take it out and use it again. There's some way to recharge it. But what I want to do, I realize that what I've done tonight may come off as sort of more emotional and spiritual than intellectual. But what I want you to know that for me, that is a conscious experiment, right? Because the thing I'm trying to determine as a fellow intellectual with my PhD and full professorship and blah, 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 is that maybe the logic of our convictions is failing us as a means of activism, as a means of engendering the sort of society that we understand sort of needs to happen. So what I've been doing, and with great difficulty and great pains, is trying to each time stop myself from making logical arguments, get out of my Maimonides Spinoza tradition and into something more not spiritual, but that conveys compassion, mutual aid, sitting with people, non-judgment, doing favors, laughing, finding, breaking boundaries, experiencing awe are so healthy for human beings and may help us see what's happening in here as the farce that it is, rather than the food we eat and air we breathe.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks.